Danny, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here.
So you are executive director of the Charlotte Sports Foundation. I think the economic benefits of what you all do are very clear. 70,500 hotel rooms booked, over 2.5 million in taxes generated, over 200,000 fans in attendance annually, and over 80 million of total economic impact. So what have you all done really well with the Charlotte Sports Foundation, and how do you build on that?
Well, what we really have is harmony in Charlotte. I say that all the time, but it's true. The city works, city, county, CRVA, the Spectrum Center, Bank of America Stadium, Truist Field. We just all work so well together, and we understand that in different events, somebody might take the lead. For instance, if the NBA All-Star game, when it was here, it was obvious the Hornets should take the lead on that, which they did. And everybody tries to be supportive, and we've got an amazing uptown area, walkability, easy to get from point A to point B, with all these venues located right in the heart of the uptown and the center city. It's pretty special. People that come to Charlotte enjoy the fact they park their car. There's plenty to do in the uptown. They can walk to all the venues. And the other thing that's been a truism is not only do people work well together, but there's been intentionality about keeping the venues first class. Mm-hmm. And you have to have first class venues in order to attract these high profile events to Charlotte. And our mission's a pretty simple one. Bring high profile sporting events to Charlotte that have economic impact and add to the quality of life.
What do you think the city of Charlotte as a whole can do, community members, the city? What do you think everyone can do to continue attracting best-in-class sporting events to Charlotte?
Well, I think it's not a complicated formula. Work well together, keep the venues first class, make sure the hospitality elements are here from not only first-class hotels, but restaurants, night entertainment. And Charlotte's doing that well. We just got to make sure we keep improving and keep getting better.
That's great. What do you enjoy most about your role right now?
Well, I love our young staff. I think we got an amazing young staff. Will Pitts, who's our Chief Operating Officer, has actually been with the foundation from day one, and he's still a young man. He's 30, I guess he's about 38. And just our whole staff, we got an amazing staff, a lot of talent. And we have fun just trying to think of things that might be a good fit for Charlotte. And as you know, we've expanded from our just the football games to a lot of different activities.
That's great. Let's talk about your career for a minute. You have a very unique pedigree because you've coached really and worked at every level. High school basketball coach, college basketball coach, college athletic director at Wofford and TCU. You were commissioner of the Southern Conference, and then obviously you were president of the Panthers. What do you think would have surprised your younger self the most about this trajectory?
Well, I think the surprise would be that I'm not a high school coach anymore. I actually thought that I would be a high school coach. I taught geometry, 5 classes of geometry plus high school coach. And I thought I would actually do that for 40 years, coach the father, son, grandson. And I could have been really happy doing that. It's wonderful. I don't think anybody makes more of a difference in young people's lives than high school coaches. So I had a blast doing that. I was so young. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I was a JV coach my first year, and then right place, right time. I was the head coach at 22, so I wasn't much older than the players. And we just had a good group. It was a wonderful time. And I thought I'd be doing it for 40 years. I didn't really I never was one of these that had a career path. I'm not saying that's bad, because some people map out kind of what they want their careers to be. I thought I'd be a high school coach for 40 years. And then I had the good fortune of being around good mentors, good bosses. No, not good bosses, superb bosses my whole career. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what it's like to not have a great boss. And so opportunities presented themselves. And so I leave Williams High School, where I was the coach, and have the opportunity to go to Elon. And back then you did a little bit of everything. So I was assistant basketball coach, head tennis coach, taught in the math department, and assistant AD. And that was great as well. And I just, I've really never chased jobs before. I just, not my thing. I just think do the job that you have, do it to the best of your ability. If you do good things, generally you'll have opportunities. And so that's just kind of how my career's gone. I've always been happy where I was. And then I've had the good fortune of having some really nice opportunities. And I've always remembered throughout my whole career that old poem about the bucket of water, and you put your hand in the bucket of water and the hole that's left is how much you'll be missed. The reality is there are a lot of people out there that can do these jobs. Mm-hmm. And I say to my students that University of South Carolina, where I teach now, as well as the Sports Foundation, I say all the time, people that get to certain positions have had some good fortune along the way. And they've had good mentors, good bosses. But in order to have good fortune, you have to be good. But there's a lot of really talented, good people that maybe haven't had a break here or a break there. And so, yeah, things have worked out nicely.
There's no doubt about it. When you're talking about some of the most, influential people in your lives, for me, I can speak to my high school coach and my college coach, and they had a bigger impact on me, or as big of an impact as anyone. And so I totally agree about that. And to your point about, the show goes on, my college coach used to say all the time, the train's going to keep on moving, whether you're on it or not, the program goes on. So I think that's great perspective.
Well, and it makes you also realize that, it's all teamwork. Everything's teamwork. And the coaching background is, I guess that's what you do in every leadership type position, is you're really just coaching. You're trying to get people to work together, play together, execute well, do the fundamentals, have good strategy, have good tactics. And so anybody that's in a certain position, it's a team role. And it's always befuddling to me when people get full of themselves and think that they're the only ones that can do that. Well, there's a lot of people that can do it. And we're all blessed to have good teamwork that enables things to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy for egos to get out of check or out of reality, but it really is about we, not me.
It's always about we. And as I look back on my career, I've had so many amazing bosses, but they all had different ways of doing things. And the wonderful thing is, if you're authentic and you do it in your own way, in your own style, that's critical. The biggest mistake young coaches make, myself included, we have a tendency to try to take on the persona of the coach we really admire.
Yeah.
And we should learn from all these coaches. We should always keep growing and learning. But you have to apply it to your own style, your own way of doing things, because people know when you're authentic. And that, I guess, as I've gotten older, simpler is better. I think there's a tendency to over-engineer things, to overcomplicate things. Generally speaking, keep it simple, work hard, get along with people, do what you say you're going to do, follow up, have good values. Things usually work out pretty good.
Well, on that note, I think all of that is really encompassed around relationships. And, when reading about your career, the one thing that really stands out is the value of your relationships collegiately and professionally at a national level. Fred Whitfield said that you have a Rolodex that, very few have, and you can get anyone on the phone at any time in the country. So pretty high praise there. What's been your approach to building relationships in your career?
Well, just a sidebar on Fred Whitfield. He's great. Fred and I have known each other since we were both assistant basketball coaches in the early 80s. I was assistant basketball coach at Elon, and he was assistant basketball coach at Campbell. So we've been friends for like 40 years, and I have high respect and high regard for him and all of his work he's done throughout his career. Been pretty amazing. I don't think there's really anything special about that. I think that I will say this about my mother and father. They hammered in the golden rule. And I get back to that word again, it's not complicated. Treat people like you'd want to be treated. And that's not hard. And trust is a very important word. And I think if there's anything, people do know that I do what I say I'm going to do. And I think over the years, just treating people like I'd want to be treated has been helpful, and it's been the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Let's flash back to the early 1990s. You're the athletic director at Wofford. The Carolina Panthers were just awarded the 29th franchise by the NFL. So great day for the city of Charlotte, really for all the Carolinas, a great time then. But you were in conversations with Jerry Richardson about landing the training camp for the Panthers at Wofford. The only problem was, the facilities were not up to grade for, a professional training camp. You needed practice fields, air conditioning in the locker rooms. You needed meeting rooms. How did you really work to get that deal done?
Well, it's a good example of people working together and connecting a lot of dots. Got to be able to connect some dots. So I went to Wofford as the AD in 1985. In 1987, I got a handwritten note, and he was famous for his handwritten notes, from Jerry Richardson, and he said, "Danny, confidential, going after an NFL team for the Carolinas," and signed it. So I wrote him back and said, "Mr. Richardson, when you get your team, we want to be in a position to host the training camp, and we're going to work towards that." So that was 1987. Now, there's some good things that happened as far as dot connecting. In 1986, the college spent a whole year studying itself. And one day a month for an entire year, a group of trustees, faculty, staff, and so forth got together, studied Wofford, and they issued a document a year later called To Improve Quality. And like most things, when you're doing strategic planning, you got a nice plan, but you got to have the funding in order to make things happen. Mm-hmm. So we had this nice plan in 1980, and then we studied every training camp in America after we got the note from Jerry Richardson. And all the training camps, they had the Cheese League up in Wisconsin and all kinds of things. And so we studied each one. We knew what it took to put on a training camp. What was interesting is the needs that we would have for a training camp coincided with the things that we had identified in that 1986 plan. So here was an opportunity to raise the money that we needed anyway for things that we needed. We could think through their design on how we would use them for a training camp, which would be there. Back then it was like 5 weeks a summer. Now it's a couple of weeks. And so we were able to speed up our fundraising that we would not have normally been able to do. Well, October 26, 1993, they announced that the franchise had been awarded to Jerry Richardson and to the Carolinas. Well, we had about a year and a half to get everything ready. And so that was fundraising. We had to buy property, probably 200 parcels with no condemnation power. And again, here tells you having good teamwork. It was Woody Willard Appraisal in Spartanburg, put it all together, and he took no commission on it. It was his gift to the college.
Wow.
He knew we didn't have the money at the time, and here's this guy that's doing all of this and putting it together, and you know how hard that is.
What a real estate story.
With no condemnation power.
Yeah.
And so, because we had to have the land to expand in order to get the practice fields and the things that we needed. There was a young architect in town named Ron Smith, and he was a one-person shop, and he gave a lot of his time to a lot of the designs that we were working on. He now has one of the largest architectural firms in the Southeast, McMillan, Paz, and Smith. They're like 350 architects in the firm. So he's done really well.
Right.
But he was giving back. There was a young banker in town by the name of Kendall Alley, who later went and did well with Wells Fargo, and he was the front person for the Wells Fargo championship, the golf tournament. He represented the Wells Fargo, but he was very helpful, and the list could go on and on and on. So all these people working together to make it happen. It was really a time crunch, though. We had to get all that done, build a facility, all in about a year and a half. And interestingly enough, we had a Furman grad that led the fundraising effort for us from a volunteer standpoint. So Chamber of Commerce, city, business, Wofford folks, everybody worked together to make it happen in a short period of time.
Right back to your lesson about teamwork, and it's never about one individual person, right? It takes a village. So.
It takes them all. I'll give you a good example. It was July 4th. The Panthers were going to be reporting like in the next week of that very first year. We were so proud of our, we had one last top dressing to do for the fields. They were immaculate, in great shape. And unfortunately, the sand that delivered for the top dressing had little bitty pebbles. Well, we couldn't have that, obviously. So on July 4, there was probably 100 people with buckets that walked all three fields to pick up little pebbles on July 4.
Wow.
How about that?
It's pretty cool. Yeah, I can remember being 10, 11, 12 years old and driving down from Shelby, where I grew up, to training camp with my dad, who's a Wofford alum, just to watch training camp. So that was always, a big deal for us to be able to go watch training camp at Wofford.
Well, it was fun. I think the last year that we had it at Wofford when I was with the Panthers, we had like 130,000 people or something like that came to training camp during that time period. So, it was great for Wofford. It was great for the Panthers. And I think, the trend now is to not go away for training camp. And of course, the Panthers have followed that trend. But it was an important time for Wofford. As your brand develops, you want to be distinctive, relevant. You want people to know about you, and you want to hold it in high esteem. Well, no better way to get the word out about Wofford than to have an NFL training camp there. People came to the campus, saw the campus keep developing and improving, and so it was really important for Wofford, and I think it was important for the Panthers as well to have a South Carolina presence.
Right. And yeah, I think, if you're recruiting a young recruit that's going to play at a Wofford or a school of that caliber, right, to say, hey, the Panthers have their training camp here, we've got state-of-the-art facilities, that's a pretty compelling pitch for a kid like that. Well,
it's funny how things work together, again, connecting dots. At the same time that all this was coming together, Wofford was also moving from NAIA to Division II to Division I AA, Division I. And one of the things you have to do is to try to get into a conference. And this is where things kind of merged. Having the facilities, now Wofford was attractive to the Southern Conference. And it just so happened, you got to be good and you got to be lucky. It just so happened that Marshall left the Southern Conference to go to the MAC at the time. And so there was a vacancy in the Southern Conference, and we were able to fill that void. But everything converged perfectly.
Right. That's a great story. Let's talk about when you've made difficult career decisions. It's evident from talking to you earlier about, you're a trust the process kind of guy. The results will take care of themselves. And, you've never been looking to make a change, right? You've always been approached. So how have you really made difficult career decisions, such as taking the athletic director job at TCU or taking the job as president of the Panthers?
Well, the TCU situation really came up in an unusual way. If you're in the industry and things are going pretty good, you generally get a lot of calls from just different search firms and so forth. And normally, I would say, I'm very happy where I am, which I was with the SoCon. But I got a call from Parker Search, a guy named Dan Parker, probably one of the leading search firms in all of athletics. So he calls and about the TCU position. And it just so happened that I was going to Atlanta the very next day to talk with Fox Sports South about some television for the SoCon. So I was going to be in Atlanta anyway, which is where their firm was. And so while I normally might have said, I'm not sure if I'd be interested, I said, well, I know TCU is a really good school, and I'm going to be in Atlanta. Let me come by and see you. So we talked for about an hour and a half. He was so enthusiastic about TCU. And 2 weeks later, I'm like the AD named AD at TCU. That's how fast it was. It went very fast. I remember going to the TCU campus. I had gone to, I couldn't go till after our softball tournament, which was being held in Charleston at the time. So I flew out of Charleston after the softball tournament to TCU. I had not been on the campus before. I got there early on a Sunday, late on a Sunday afternoon. I wasn't going to interview till the next morning. And I walked the campus, and it just felt, it felt right. Beautiful campus. I remember walking to the tennis complex and all these flowers, immaculate. And I said, this is pretty special. And then had a chance to meet the people. The chancellor is still there. He was named chancellor in 2002. He's done a remarkable job. He's great. Again, I'm referencing great bosses again.
Right.
And we had a wonderful time there. Fort Worth was great. A lot of people think that Texas folks will maybe stiff arm you a little bit. You're not from here.
Yeah.
And it's the absolute opposite. They wrap their arms around you because they want you to love Texas as much as they love Texas, and they love Texas. And so we hit it at a good time. Oil and gas was good. When oil and gas is good in Texas, everything's great. Our sports teams were doing well. Our football team was top 10. I mean, it was a really good time. And I might still be there if I hadn't gotten the call from Mr. Richardson, but it was great. Fort Worth, I think Fort Worth's a lot like Charlotte. You have this major metropolitan area, but you still have the warmth and the
Southern
hospitality and the good relationship building. So, it's great. We love Fort Worth and we love Charlotte.
And so what was the main driver? That was that decision, right? It was serendipitous. You happened to be in Atlanta, or you already had plans to be in Atlanta, so maybe a little bit of serendipity there. But what about the president of the Panthers opportunity? How did you face or reconcile with that decision?
Well, I get a call out of the blue. I'd never thought about the NFL. And I got a call from Mr. Richardson, and he said, hey, I want Danny. he doesn't. There's not a lot of flowery. Yeah. He gets straight to the point.
Yeah.
So he said, Danny, I think we got there's a great opportunity for you, but I really can't talk about it today. But I want you to be thinking about if it was a great opportunity, would you be able to look at it? Mm-hmm. And so I had no idea because I never had thought about the pros, and I didn't know, maybe he was doing something in a different space or whatever. But anyway, then he calls back a day or two later, offers me the opportunity to come to the Panthers. And so, again, there's that trust factor. Mm-hmm. People, this is a funny story, actually. I never asked what my salary would be or anything. I never asked.
Wow.
And I remember one of my lawyer friends with the council with TCU. She said, "What? You did what?" So anyway, but I knew Jerry Richardson would be fair, and he was obviously more than fair.
And it was the right fit.
So I didn't, yeah. And I loved the pros. I loved the college. I loved small college. I loved high school. And we talked earlier about fundamentals. The fundamentals are the same for every one of those. Absolutely the same for every one. It's just scales are different. And rather than having like 20 sports at TCU, you have one with the Panthers. Of course, the scale of that is mammoth.
Right.
But really, the fundamentals are the same, and we couldn't have hit it at a better time. We had so many wonderful people with the Panthers. It's a great organization. We had a lot of harmony. Our kind of pillars were hard work, harmony, teamwork, listen, and respect. And it was a fun time.
Yeah, it is interesting because when you think about people that are highly productive, highly successful, a lot of times they're just doing the small things. They're blocking and tackling and doing the little things just better than anybody else. But they're not doing anything that's some secret out there, right? They're doing the little things really well.
It's fundamentals, yeah. And executing and being creative, and having strategy and tactics and so forth. But at the end of the day, those 5 core values come back pretty loudly.
You're probably one of the only people I've ever met that took a job without knowing what the pay was going to be. Yeah. That's an element of good faith.
Yeah, well, I think trust is a really important word. Stephen Covey wrote a book about speed of trust, and if you trust people, you cut through so much stuff. Mm-hmm. And I've had the good fortune of everybody I've worked with, I've trusted. So when you do that, it takes a lot of clutter out of the picture.
Yeah, it's amazing how in sports, business, really, no matter what your teamwork, right, athletics, no matter what you're really in, it all gets back to that basic, human behavior of trust and how important that is.
Well, people working together, I mean, it makes a difference. And if you look at some of the teams that we had at the Panthers, if you look at that Super Bowl run of 2015, mm-hmm. that team was amazing. The chemistry, the trust, the quality of the people that were on that team, the leadership on that team. And it was so much fun to just watch them. 17 in a row is pretty good.
Yeah, well, that was actually my next topic. So, that was 2015, 15-1 season during the regular season, a really amazing year. I've never seen Charlotte just as electric. And obviously there's, I think from a real estate standpoint, we're in 2024 versus 2015, and there's a lot more real estate appetite, globally with investors here and just more development, more growth. But I've still never seen Charlotte as electric, and the buzz that was around that year. I mean, there was so much momentum in the city. It was really amazing to watch. But I guess my question for you is, what was the most memorable thing about that Super Bowl run?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story first. In 2009, when I first came to the Panthers, there was a somebody had us over for dinner, and there was like 4 couples. And so I asked the question to each one of the couples, what's your favorite Panther moment? And so one of them said the Steve Smith's catch, or one of them said something about Sam Mills' interception, so forth. But one of the ladies said, my favorite moment of all of the Panthers is the Super Bowl run of 2003. She said, it's interesting, she said exactly what you said. I've never seen Charlotte more harmonious. Mm-hmm. I've never seen all walks of life come together so well. And it was one of the most special things in all of Charlotte, because sports brings people together in a very unique way. Mm-hmm. Well, it got replicated in 2015, and I got to see it for myself, and it was special. I mean, everybody pulling together, all walks of life. It was a fun year for sure.
Yeah, it really was. It was there was so much just electricity and excitement around the team. It was really fun to watch.
Well, we had so many great players that were great people. Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis, Ryan Khalil, Greg Olson, Jonathan Stewart. The list can go on, and Cam Newton, who had so much charisma. And so the interesting thing about Cam is that people had this opinion that he was really interested in individual stats. He was zero interested in individual stats. Never heard him even talk about an individual stat. What he was very interested in was winning. Very team-oriented, winning. He had great charisma. He was tough. And it was just a fun group to be around, and Ron Rivera and the coaching staff. It was great. Dave Gettleman, and we had 2 really good general managers when I was there, and Dave Gettleman and Marty Herney. Again, different styles, and you can be different styles and things. And yeah, it was great.
Yeah, what a great, I mean, man, the list goes on of amazing people that were a part of that run. So really cool. Let's talk briefly about when you briefly retired following the Panthers. I got a kick out of reading about Island Danny versus professional Danny. What would you say is the biggest difference between Island Danny and professional Danny?
Luxury of time. I've told all my friends this because they all thought I'd go crazy when we went to the beach in 2017, and I was just going to do a little bit of consulting and teach a day or 2 at the University of South Carolina in Columbia. So that was going to be it. And what I found was the luxury of time. I did not get bored 1 second, but I loved the luxury of time because I could do my own schedule at whatever I wanted to do. And I'd never had that before. Because when you grow up in the athletic world, and really the business world too, it becomes a lifestyle for you more than just, because if you're on a college campus, you're doing something almost every night, or there's some activity every weekend, every night, and so forth. But it's great. It's a lifestyle, and we loved it, and our family loved it. Our children loved it. It was great to grow up on a college campus, but luxury of time is pretty good.
What would your family or close friends say about the biggest difference between Island Danny and professional Danny?
I don't know if I would say is I had the luxury of time. I was staying busy doing what I wanted to do, so I don't know if they would see that much difference.
Well, you're an avid walker, I read, so 6 to 7 miles a day and more sometimes. I love to walk. It's very simple, right? It's one of the fundamentals, but it's amazing what an impact it can have and how healthy it is for you. But what do you get the most out of walking?
Well, I've got a good friend that I walk with. He's great, and he lives about a block from us at Sullivan's Island. So we'll take off, usually walking about 11, We'll go about an hour. We'll grab a quick lunch, and then we'll walk another 30 minutes. So we'll get about 6 miles in. We solve a lot of the world's problems. Nobody listens, but it's pretty nice. And you get the benefit of not only the physical part, but just the mental part of just talking about things. He's very big sports advocate as well. And so we talk a lot of sports, but we talk a little bit about everything. He's done really well in the business world, and so I like to pick his brain.
Yeah, that's great. This wasn't on my topic for today or topics of conversation, but what do you make of NIL right now and everything that's going on in college athletics?
It's just a different landscape. But in a lot of ways, over 100 years, things have ebbed and flowed. If you go back to the Southern Conference, which was formed in 1921, it had like 20-some schools in the Southern Conference, and they ended up going to about 30. And so what you have over time is you have expansion and then contraction. Expansion, contraction. So we're in the expansion mode now, but there'll be at some point, just like it happened in the old WAC conference. There were 16 in the WAC conference. 8 of them felt like they were carrying the load, so they broke off and formed the Mountain West Conference. That's how the Mountain West Conference formed. Southern Conference, 1921. In 1932, the SEC broke off from the Southern Conference. In 1953, the ACC was formed from the Southern Conference. So the Southern Conference birthed these 2 major conferences in the Southeast. So you got ebb and flow on a conference standpoint. The other thing you have, if you go back and read the Carnegie report on higher education in the 20s, it almost reads like today's world. You had the same kind of, you'd think they could have been solved over 100 years, but you have a lot of the same issues in that era as you're having today. It's rather than using Pullman cars, your flights. And but a lot of the same issues that you saw back then, you still see in today. I think it's a natural evolution on I think NIL is a misnomer, really. Name, image, and likeness. It's really more pay for play when you deal with the collectives and so forth. In the Olympics, you would have more name, image, and likeness. Michael Phelps has name, image, and likeness. Simone Biles has name, image, and likeness. So they're compensated for that with their endorsement deals. The 16th best pole vaulter in the world is great, but they don't really have, that's not a name, image, and likeness thing. So there's no endorsements coming there that are of any kind of magnitude. Well, just like this Carnegie report, when you have boosters and supporters involved in the college landscape, it's just a different dynamic than you have in any other kind of sports world. So I think the Power Four now, with the media rights being what they are, it makes sense for the players to benefit from the media rights. I personally think that there'll be collective bargaining that'll be coming down the pipeline, maybe a number of years from now. In a perfect world, I think I would speed it up because I think it's coming anyway, and it would help put some parameters around things. I think the difficulties are around the fact that there's not a lot of guardrails, and you have free agency every single year. Well, you'd never have free agency every single year in the NFL. I remember during that pretty tense situation with the Players Association and the owners back in 2010, 2011, when all of that was coming together. And at the time, Mr. Richardson was the lead for the owners, and he was very dialed into a 10-year labor agreement with no opt-outs so that you would have certainty. And he felt like that would be better for the owners and it would be better for the players, and that proved to be true. Because when you have certainty, people will invest more. And so your TV contracts would be better because they could invest in it. If you have a 5 or 6 year agreement, you're already renegotiating that after 3 years, so you're constantly in negotiation mode. And so sponsorships were better, TV was better, and the old rising tides, both the owners and the players benefited in a big way. So I think at the Power 4 level, that makes a lot of sense because there's enough media rights there that make it a palatable and reasonable thing to do. I don't think that they're at the Group of 5 or the FCS level and so forth, there's not enough media rights dollars to make that reasonable from an NIL standpoint or a distributing any kind of media rights money. That's really a Power 4 thing. And at the end of the day, there's been a lot of improvements, as you well know, on the student athlete experience. And so most of the people that are participating in college athletics from a student standpoint would say things are pretty good. So for the vast majority, it's a pretty good situation.
Yeah, my one concern is, and I'm not in this space, right? But, say you've got a kid that's making, several $100,000 a year, right? Because there's very few. I think the quarterback that's making $1 million a year at, a major school, that's a little bit of an anomaly. There's not a lot of guys like that. But, some of these kids that are making, a couple $100,000 a year, they're not going to go pro, or they're not going to play sports in Europe or professional after. And then they go have to work a real job where they're making significantly less. I think, that's one of my concerns is, you go from this quality of life or standard of living or lifestyle creep, whatever you want to call it, right? And they're making, $250,000, $300,000, and then they have to go work a real job where they're making significantly less. So I don't know. I hope there's a generation of athletes that can, accept and prepare for the real world after sports.
Well, I think that's a fair worry. In most people's work history, your income generally will go like that. So it will rise. What you wouldn't want is an inverse kind of relationship, because, as you say, you get used to this standard of living, and then if those economics are lessened over the years, you got to be able to understand that and adjust to that. So I think all the colleges are working hard to try to make sure that there's an understanding. Obviously, the students have to listen, but hopefully they're going to be good stewards with the dollars that they have and be able to invest some of the dollars wisely. They will have the benefit of time if they invest them.
That's right. No, that is the one thing. If you think about compounding interest over 30, 40 years, that they could be in really good shape with that kind of money, right? So hopefully there's some good financial advisors out there that are really helping guide these young guys and girls. So.
Well, that's been fun too, watching the evolution of college athletics since Title IX. How great is it for all the opportunities both the men and women are having, and we're seeing the outcome of that in the Olympics, and it's been great. I think all of my friends that are in college athletics, their most fun part is working with the students on the respective teams. They love that time when they're interacting with the young people.
Yep, that's great. Well, Danny, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a pleasure speaking with you. And, Charlotte and the Carolinas has been really lucky to have you guiding, on multiple levels, collegiately and professionally. So really appreciate your time today.
Great. Thanks for having me.